Holy Wars, Unholy Numbers, a story about courage and cowardice, piety and greed, faith and fanaticism. It's about the Crusades, a series of religious expeditions sanctioned by the Latin Church in the medieval period, with the goal of reclaiming the Holy Land from Muslim rule. Between 1096 and 1291, 8 major crusades were launched into the Levant, an area comprising modern-day Israel, Palestine, Jordan, Lebanon, Syria, and Turkey. The first 4 crusades saw significant Christian success. They seized large territories, established crusader states, and captured the key holy sites. However, as the century wore on, Muslim forces pushed back against the European invaders and eventually recaptured all of the lost territory. While the Crusades failed in their overall objective, they left a lasting impact on both Europe and the Middle East, influencing politics, religion, culture, and trade for centuries to come. But let's start with the most infamous moment in the history of the Crusades, the sack of Jerusalem. On July 1099, European soldiers, many of them French, German, and Italian peasants armed with little more than pitchforks and clubs, stormed the city. In the ensuing chaos, thousands of Muslims, Jews, and even fellow Eastern Christians who had lived there for centuries were massacred. Chronicler Fulcher of Chartres wrote, "No mercy was shown, not to age or sex or condition, to plunder, to kill, to wound, to torture, to burn, to rob, and to commit every kind of wickedness. They ran after each other through the streets and alleys, hewing people to pieces and dispatching them in 1,000 different ways." Fulcher claimed that over 40,000 people were killed, but those figures should be treated with skepticism given the wildly inaccurate and often exaggerated accounts of medieval chroniclers. The storming of Jerusalem came at the end of the First Crusade, a sprawling, disorganized campaign that began in 1095 after Pope Urban II called for volunteers to seize Jerusalem from Muslim rulers. As the First Crusade got underway, word spread across Europe, and volunteers by the thousands, mostly poor landless men, headed east. By the end, there may have been as many as 60,000 European soldiers in the Levant, though estimates vary widely. Reaching the Holy Land was no easy feat, and along the way, the Crusaders seized cities like Antioch and Jerusalem, battling armies of the Seljuk Turks and the Muslim lords of northern Syria. The First Crusade ended in 1099 with the capture of Jerusalem, but the newly established Crusader kingdom soon found itself fighting for survival against determined Muslim opponents. Pope Urban II granted the Kingdom of Jerusalem sovereignty over the coastal region, stretching from the Sea of Galilee to the Egyptian border, as well as inland to the River Jordan and the city of Damascus. Although geographically compact, the kingdom contained diverse regions. In the south, rolling hills and plains yielded to the rugged mountains of the interior and the arid Syrian desert to the east. Despite these challenges, ambitious Crusader leaders sought to expand their realm, leading to conflicts with neighboring Muslim states. These early rulers also faced the challenge of governing a kingdom where the vast majority of the population was non-Christian. The Crusaders were a tiny minority, numbering no more than 2 to 4% of the total population, with most of the subjects being native Muslims and Jews. The establishment of the Kingdom of Jerusalem in 1099 was a watershed moment in medieval European history. For centuries, the idea of a Christian state in a Holy Land had been a dream deferred. Now it was a reality. This achievement would inspire many Europeans to participate in subsequent crusades, but it would also pose unique challenges. The Crusaders quickly found themselves at war with neighboring Muslim powers, including the Zengid dynasty of northern Syria. Tensions escalated, leading to the Battle of the Horns of Hattin in 1187, a decisive Muslim victory that resulted in the capture of Jerusalem by Saladin, the legendary Muslim leader. This defeat prompted the launch of the Third Crusade, which included some of the most famous medieval warriors: Richard the Lionheart, Philip II of France, and Holy Roman Emperor Frederick Barbarossa. Despite their prowess, the Crusaders were unable to recapture Jerusalem. Instead, a truce was negotiated granting limited access to the city for pilgrims. After the setback of the Third Crusade, European leaders recognized the need for a more organized approach to holding the Holy Land. In 1188, Pope Gregory VIII called for the Fourth Crusade. Although it initially aimed to capture Jerusalem, political and financial considerations led to its diversion to Egypt. This marked a turning point in the Crusades. The focus shifted from religious zeal to strategic and economic interests, a trend that would continue in subsequent expeditions. Meanwhile, the Kingdom of Jerusalem continued to face challenges. Internal divisions, weak leadership, and the threat of external enemies took a heavy toll. By the late 12th century, the kingdom was on the brink of collapse. The arrival of the Mongols in the Middle East further destabilized the region, posing a grave threat to the Crusader states. The Mongol onslaught overwhelmed Jerusalem, forcing King Henry II to flee to the island fortress of Acre in 1218. With the Mongols advancing, European leaders convened the Fifth Crusade in 1217. Despite initial successes, the crusade ultimately failed to achieve its goals. By 1229, the Crusaders had seized Jerusalem once again, but this victory proved short-lived. Political maneuvering led to a quick withdrawal, and the city was lost once more in 1244. As the Crusades progressed, their nature evolved. Early expeditions were largely spontaneous responses to papal appeals, driven by religious fervor. Later crusades became more structured affairs, planned and funded by European royalty. The Sixth Crusade in 1228–29 was notable for its diplomatic conclusion, securing 6 months of truce with Sultan al-Kamil in exchange for an annual tribute, marking an early instance of peaceful coexistence in the region. Throughout the Crusades, European involvement in a Holy Land was not limited to military campaigns. The establishment of trading posts and the flow of wealth generated through trade networks had a significant impact on medieval European economies. Moreover, contact with the cultures of the Middle East introduced Europeans to new ideas and goods. For example, Venetian merchants returning from the East often carried with them spices, silks and ceramics that added to their fortunes and exposed Europeans to exotic products from distant lands. By the late 13th century, the balance of power in the Levant had decisively shifted in favor of the Mamluk dynasty of Egypt. Facing the growing strength of the Mamluk Sultanate, European leaders convened the Seventh Crusade in 1248, led by King Louis IX of France. Despite initial victories, the crusade ultimately met with defeat and Louis was captured by the Mamluks, while his brother, King Blanche of France, negotiated his release. The Seventh Crusade suffered a severe setback. The Eighth Crusade in 1270 was the final major effort to recapture Jerusalem. Led once again by King Louis IX, the expedition aimed to conquer Tunis in North Africa. However, the crusade ended in disaster when Louis contracted malaria and died, leading to the expedition's abandonment. The Crusades were a complex web of religious zeal, political ambition, and economic interest. They had profound effects on both Europe and the Middle East, reshaping the religious, cultural, and political landscapes of the regions. The legacy of the Crusades continues to be debated and discussed, serving as a reminder of the complexities of history and the multifaceted nature of human endeavors. Over the course of the Crusades, an estimated 1 to 3 million people lost their lives. Around 500,000 European Christians are believed to have perished in the fighting, while hundreds of thousands more are estimated to have died in the siege of Jerusalem alone. The Crusades also saw widespread destruction, particularly of holy sites and cultural treasures. The burning of the Great Library of Antioch in 1154, which housed thousands of ancient manuscripts and texts, was a devastating loss for scholarship during the medieval period. Despite the immense loss of life and destruction, the Crusades also led to cultural exchanges and the spread of knowledge between Europe and the Middle East. European scholars and merchants gained access to classical texts and scientific works from the Islamic world. Similarly, Muslim scholars studied Latin texts that had been translated into Arabic. The Crusades also spurred the growth of trade networks, as European merchants sought to access the valuable goods of the Middle East. Cities like Venice, Genoa, and Pisa grew wealthy through trade in spices, textiles, and other commodities. Yet perhaps the most enduring aspect of the Crusades is their legacy in art, literature, and popular culture. Tales of brave knights, fierce battles, and mythical relics like the Holy Grail captured the imaginations of medieval audiences. Works like the Song of Roland and stories of the Knights Templar continue to fascinate readers today. In essence, the Crusades represent a pivotal and controversial period in history. They shaped the course of medieval Europe and the Middle East, leaving an indelible mark on the religious, cultural, and political landscapes of the regions. The Crusades serve as a reminder of the complexities of human history and the multifaceted nature of our interactions with the past. Studying the Crusades allows us to gain a deeper understanding of the medieval world and the forces that shaped it. It encourages us to examine the interplay of religion, politics, economics, and culture, and to consider the lasting impact of these events on the world we live in today. And for more on the era of chivalry, courage, and castles, stay tuned for more content.